I mean, for years, I thought that men just cheat, period. Accept it. Men cheat.
He cheated with her. And so when I was older, he got involved with somebody and, my mom would tell me about it. So I think I was living in New York at this time and I would approach my dad. I would ask him about it and he would deny it. He made it almost seem like my mother was crazy. Now I knew she wasn't crazy.
Right.
And, it was just ugly. And I remember talking to my friend and she would say how her dad cheated. But what stuck in my mind was that her dad cheated, but he always kept it away from the house. Where with my father's situation, the lady that I'm referring to now, when I was older, she would call the house, this is before cell phones. So multiple hangups on the phone, it really be stressing my mother out. One time she did say some really rude things I won't go into, but some really rude things to my mom on the phone. That's when I thought of my friend, like, okay, if you're going to do it, keep it away from home, And so, it really upset me. Like, how can you do that to somebody? And
hola, everyone. Let's start healing. I'm Adrianne Murchison, and welcome to episode 55 of the Let's Start Healing podcast. I know sometimes these days it doesn't feel like it, but we have more in common than we think, and what we have in common can change the world. I'm super excited about this episode. This is a really good one coming to you today. I am in conversation with my lifelong best friend, Tonya Guzman, and we are talking about a lot of things that come up in life. Obviously, we'll talk about our friendship. We've been friends, best friends, since I was 9 years old. We met through our dads, and we'll go into all of that. But we talk about so many things. We talk about loss, losing parents, the impact that having a father who's unfaithful can have on a young girl, and just the impressions that it makes. Both of our fathers were not faithful to our mothers. So we go into that. It's very interesting. Just so many things come up in this conversation. And it's funny, I recently said to Tonya that we're like fraternal twins because we are so simpatico in many ways, and then we're different in some ways. And I never told her this, but I've always felt a little protective of Tonya because one of the ways in which we're different is Tonya can be hardcore, and that word will come up when she mentions my dad later on. And Tonya, she has this side of herself where she can be hardcore, and I have a side of myself where I can be very sensitive. I feel things very deeply, and it doesn't take much for me to shed a tear. And in life, as we were growing up and, experiencing our teenage years and then young adulthood, if she was ever in emotional pain or feeling hurt about something, I would feel very protective of her within my spirit because that's not how she walks around in the world. It's so funny that I'm bringing this up because, as I said in the conversation, she brings that up about my dad, and she brings up how they were a little bit similar in that way. And I remember when my dad passed, and I thought how I just wanted to hold his hand as he went up to heaven because it might seem foreign to him. But I digress. Tonya she is one of the joys of my life. She is one of the major blessings in my life. She grew up as an only child. I grew up with two older brothers, and they were 5 and 6 years older than me. So sometimes I felt like an only child, or sometimes I felt lonely. So when we became friends, we just bonded. And I say that at the same time, my brother, Jeff, my late brother, Jeff, he never showed it. towards her, but he adored Tonya, and so much so that he named his own daughter Tonya. So I'm excited for you to meet her, and as we discuss our friendship, we will discuss things that come up in life, relationships with our parents, and just kind of navigating life with dads who we love, and yet there's this aspect going on with them. Both of our fathers drank. Both of our fathers were strong men. They were both detectives with the Buffalo Police Department. Tonya's dad worked in homicide. My dad worked in armed robbery. They were both trained hostage negotiators. They trained at the FBI Academy in DC. And I don't know how it is now, but years ago in Buffalo, and it's my understanding in other cities as well, if there was a hostage situation, a trained negotiator had to be called in. So our fathers were trained negotiators, and they would be called into hostage situations when they would arise in Buffalo, along with other detectives who had trained at the academy as well. And our moms were like sisters. So it's going to be a fun, interesting conversation. You will also hear a lot of laughter. Tonya's married this year. She will be married for 30 years. I just cannot believe it, that time has gone by that fast. And she has 3 young adult daughters who are absolutely beautiful. So we live together in New York City, and we'll talk about life in New York. As I think about our friendship, I'm reminded how we have kept each other grounded through all these years. And it brings me to how we're experiencing this divide in our country that feels so much more extreme after the insurrection on January 6th. And it's interesting to me how this whole thing that's going on with us politically is taking place during this pandemic. And for most of us, I think the pandemic has been a wake-up call to really look in the mirror at who we really are in our skin. For some people, it's been a time of renewal. For other people, through the challenges of the pandemic, it's been a time of, well, I'll use myself as an example. It's been very challenging for me in my journey through this pandemic, and it's been a time of self-reflection. I've been a person that has been very willing to look at myself and go within and look at my faults and look at my strengths, yada, yada, yada. But this pandemic has had me look at myself in deeper ways and come to more profound realizations about myself, about, I think now, thank goodness, I'm looking at my strengths in a great way. But definitely through many of these months, I've been looking at my weaknesses, the things that I could do better, the things I could do differently. And I say that to come back to where we are with this political divide and where we fall along this political divide. And I don't know, me personally, I've talked to so many people about their political leanings. And I think the thing, whether you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, I think the thing that gets me is people who have their head in the sand. If somebody is at one extreme or another and they just feel strongly about where they stand, I can respect that. I may not like it. It may be different from how I may personally feel. But if you really feel something and that's how you feel, fine. I always say I like clarity. But people who have their head in the sand when something is so obvious, like let's take, for example, racism. Someone who has their head in the sand about racism and says that they don't see racism where racism is so apparent. I think that's one of the challenges that I have inside me, to be able to forgive that type of thing and keep it moving. So one of the blessings I think in my life is not only my blood family who will keep me real, but Tonya has been in my life since I was 9, as I said. I do remember when we were little and I was very impressionable, and I might think something or say something, and Tonya would definitely pull me back in line. And I just really appreciate that. Anyway, let's get started. Let's meet her and let's start healing. Welcome, Tonya.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I want everybody to see how beautiful you look, as always.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, though.
Tonya, did you know that we've known each other most of our lives?
Yep, I'm very aware. I have very few memories before you, actually. I know
Really?
you do, but
Yeah, I'm the one who always has to say, remember this, remember that.
yeah. And then I say, yeah, kind of. That's a good one.
Well, so what do you remember about when we met? I remember I was 9 and you were 10.
Yep. I do not remember ages. I just remember being young. And I remember my dad and your dad being there. And I think, I just remember, another Black person. Yay.
Right. Because we were riding the bus to our respective schools. We were on the same bus, school bus.
Yeah. Yeah. But not for that long, right?
Yeah, it feels like it was for maybe that school year, maybe
that year.
If that.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, but I remember thinking that you were really nice, and sometimes we would talk in the morning, and sometimes we wouldn't. Even though we always sat together, because sometimes you weren't in the mood to talk in the morning.
Maybe you weren't in the mood.
No, I was always in the mood to talk and chit chat in the morning. But, sometimes we just ride in silence, which was cool.
Yeah, I'm not really a morning person, so that might be correct.
I'm not either, but I think probably because I learned to sleep in through, our friendship. And
then, you're used to, you were used to a louder household than I was.
Right.
So I lived in silence.
Yes, we're going to get that, you being an only child. Well, maybe we could talk about that now, because one thing about you being an only child was you got all the really good presents, like the trampoline before people had trampolines, and the double bike. And what was that like?
See, I forgot about the double bike, the tandem bike. Yes, I
forgot. I remember it was another name. Yeah, a tandem bike. And your grandmother would buy you all this stuff in addition to your parents.
Well, I will have to admit I had a really great childhood. There was nothing that I wanted that I didn't get, but I feel like it was a good balance because, my mother would not have a spoiled child. She would not have anyone cutting up, that's for sure. But my grandmother had my mother, obviously, that's my maternal grandmother, and my mother's an only child. And my grandmother had my mother young. So I feel like when my mother had me being an only grandchild, and then with my grandmother being a little bit older than when she had my mother, she had an opportunity to do things for me that she really wasn't able to do for my mother. So I was super, super spoiled by her. Anything I wanted. There was never any limits. I never even looked at price tags when I wanted things. And I only remember that because my mother would ask me, well, how much is it? And I'm like,
you're like, I don't know. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. So, and in addition, though, to just, getting things, I was very much loved. I always felt loved, by both parents, even though, my dad and I later had our issues, but by particularly my mother, father, and grandmother, I always felt, wanted. I always felt they wanted the best for me. Yeah. So I will have to say it was a really good childhood.
Yeah. You know what? We never talked about exactly what you just said about how you always felt loved and wanted. And of course, I know my parents, loved me enormously. But you know that I grew up with self-esteem issues, and I always thought of you having that secure feeling within yourself because you were an only child, which I've talked to other kids, other adults who were only children, and they were the only child in their house. And they did say they grew up with a sense of security. But I never heard you phrase it in the way that you just did, about how you always felt just so loved by the three of them. Of course, other people too, but those three core people, and never wanted for anything. And just, you had that security because of the love of them. And you were not a spoiled kid by any means. That is true.
My mom was really the disciplinarian. And then my dad growing up actually had, some alcohol issues, not like a falling over drunk, but, he would drink probably more than he should. But he never was like that grumpy drunk. As a matter of fact, I would often take advantage, like, oh, can I have $5? And then I would get 20. But, on the flip side, he probably would have gave it to me anyway. So,
yeah, of course he would have.
I always, just knew that they wanted the best for me, and they would sacrifice and put me in private schools when I'm sure they could have did something else with that money. And I know that my grandmother helped them do that too. And so you can have things and people can buy you things, but that never replaces, a kid feeling loved. So
right.
I always knew that I was loved.
Yeah.
And they would tell me, well, I'm going to take that. I think my dad would tell me probably more. And he would tell me many, many times that he never wanted a boy and he was always happy with a girl. And, he got to have the same experiences with sports. And,
right.
And as a result of that, I have told my husband to let his daughters know how happy he is with having daughters because, men often, at least that's the perception, that men often want sons. So,
right. And he is so outnumbered for women. But yeah, I mean, I just am always fascinated with other people too, but with the dynamic of in our spirits, you and I, in our respective spirits, and just how secure you are, in matter of fact, you are within yourself. And I have had to grow into my sense of security that I have now. And I'm not at Z necessarily. And, our parents were the best of friends, and my parents loved me enormously also. And yet I still have that something inside me. So that's why I like talking to you about it.
Well, I do think that there are also other factors that contribute to maybe your confidence being on a lower scale, so to speak, especially, the foundation. If your foundation is shook a little bit for whatever reason, I think that is going to contribute to one's self-esteem. So, right.
So, and then I want to also say our families were intertwined. Our moms were like sisters. Our fathers were close. My father also had a drinking problem, as you know. They were both cops. And then at one point, you and my older brother both took karate lessons, even though, he was significantly older than you too. You guys took karate lessons together as kids. So he always loved you so much, Tonya.
You know what's funny? I did want to play karate initially, but then I feel like I quickly realized that wasn't my gift. And
really? Did you get beyond the yellow belt? Did you get the orange belt?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. So,
okay.
But I still kept on, or my parents kept me in it longer than I really wanted to be in it.
Wow.
But, it was good because there were times that I thought I might go to your school and help you out with some people. So.
Oh, you mean when I was going through the racism thing?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. I was getting into fights. That's for another podcast. People calling me the N-word and have to fight them. So why do you think that our friendship has stuck all these years? There has not been any gap in our friendship. We have just rolled along since we were 9 years old. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think initially that I'll have to mention again, I think initially by us being in a predominantly white neighborhood as well as a predominantly white school system, that I think that's what drew us to each other. And, I know me seeing, other people whose parents are African American, it really just made me feel connected to you. And I think that, I know you bring up our differences, but, you always had positive energy. You're always a sweet person and you were normal. So that helped. And then I think, as we grew older, it just takes two people to maintain a relationship, no matter what type of relationship it is. And I remember when you went away to college, I was super sad, but I never felt like we would lose touch. It never even crossed my mind. And I think that, by that time, we just loved each other so much. And, as we talked about, I'm an only child. So, and you were my sister. And
right.
I've had other friends. I remember when we met, we both had other best friends.
Right.
Who we don't speak to anymore. But I just knew you were always going to be in my life.
Yeah.
Was never a question. So,
yeah. And in some ways, I felt like an only child a little bit because my brothers were 5 and 6 years older than me. I was the only girl. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you were my sister, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But even when you moved away, now that we're talking about this, I remember I was afraid when you moved because we initially were in the same neighborhood and then you moved about 30, 40 minutes away to another suburb. And I thought, oh, gosh, you're gone. And very quickly I found that didn't matter. But yeah, I do remember wondering, were we going to drift apart when you moved?
I also think our parents helped a little bit, our moms maybe. Mm-hmm. I feel like they were very accommodating with us still being in touch and me going to your house and you coming to my house. I remember when, I lost someone close to me. I felt like my mom thought it was important and my dad thought it was important that, I at least spend time with you and basically so you could watch me. But it was a good distraction to not just stay home and to be with somebody that you care about and that cares about you. So
right. So I've told you this before, but I have to say this for the sake of the podcast. We used to spend the night over each other's houses, and if it was summertime, then it might be several days. It might be a week or 10 days that we might take turns spending the night over each other's houses, or if it was Christmas time or something like that. And we would just laugh and laugh and laugh. And we could just look at something and then look at each other. We could see somebody walking down the street and we look at each other and we just fall out laughing. And I know for a fact that I would not have my sense of humor. I would not have a sense of humor to the degree that I do, which is a great degree, if it wasn't for you. And I don't think that our sense of humor is necessarily identical, but I mean, I can make my own self laugh, and I know that it is a result of, I have this sense of humor that it just evolved and evolved and evolved over the years. And it came from our friendship and just cracking up, all the time.
That's funny. I don't think I've ever heard you say that before, but I do think that, we spend so much time together. I mean, I don't have any siblings, so I don't have that to compare it to, but I almost felt like we were twinning a lot. And I might have said this throughout our relationship growing up, but there were often times like, you could say something and I could finish it or vice versa, or we just knew like what the other was about to say, or like you said, just laugh at something without even having to say it out loud, but not just spending time together, but, as close as we were and are still today. I just think that contributed to us being able to just converse sometimes openly and sometimes not openly.
Right. And then I should say that we lived together in New York, and you were in New York first, and I was in Atlanta, and you thought, why don't you move here? And I didn't see how that, I could possibly move to New York. And you were like, well, why not? And I was like, well, I don't have a bed. I don't have this. I don't have that. Well, you could ship your bed here. No, you bought me a bed. I sent you the money. I was like, well, you were like, well, I'll buy the bed. And I said, well, I want a water bed. And so then you went and you got this water bed for me, and it was all set up when we got there, and my mom and I drove there, and we got lost, and it ended up being like this 20-hour drive, and my mother did most of the driving. We got there at about 2 a.m. in the morning. I remember thinking that New York, everything was going to open all night long. That's what you always hear. If you don't know New York, you always hear nothing ever closes. So things were closed. And I was like, I don't understand.
Well, I think things close more so like in Queens than they do like in the city.
Right. And then I was thinking today, just the adjustment to New York after I got a job, and I would come home. I got a job. We both worked in Manhattan. We lived in Queens in that apartment. And when I would come home from work, I would often just sit on the couch and not move because I was just trying to digest. It was like I had been something affected. I don't know. I felt the energy of the day. I don't know. My mind was still going. But you know how you come in, you change your clothes, you relax. It was a long time before I did that. I would just sit on the couch for a long time. I would just sit there and just be like, oh, it was a day. It was a lot of energy.
Do you think that's because like it's a faster pace? Like everything. Yeah.
And there were so many people on the street. And I remember you worked on the west side. I worked on the east side of Midtown Manhattan. And it was so busy. I used to say, because I equate busyness with downtown. Do you remember I used to ask you, we're not downtown? Are you sure we're not downtown? So busy.
It's all one big downtown.
Right. And I used to say, why are there so many people? There's no event going on. Like there was just so many people on the sidewalk.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. Well, I don't know. See, I feel like you acclimated,
I did
quickly.
I did, especially after I got a job. And at first, when I was looking for a job, remember they used to have people who were recruiters or headhunters, and they would you had a job, so they might not do this to you, but they would stop you on the street and say, hey, you looking for a job? And then they would give you a card to go to an agency. Okay. And so when I first got to New York, I must have looked like I needed a job, like I was out of work. And I used to get stopped all the time. People would give me their card all the time to go to different agencies, right? But after I got a job, nobody ever stopped me again. And I was just like, I must look like I work. But then after I got the job at Bear Stearns, I must have looked like I was employed because nobody would stop me anymore.
That's so funny because I don't recall anybody ever stopping me about that. Like, what do we have? Employed, not employed signs on
All right, I'm going to throw some things out there, and I just want to know what comes to mind for yourself and for me, or for yourself, period. Okay? So
no, let's both do it.
Okay. Okay, well, I'll do you and you do me. So I'm going to say boyfriends, you. Okay, so I'm throwing out the word boyfriends. And with you, I'm thinking about all of your boyfriends that you had. And they lasted a while. Of course, can I say names or can I not say names?
Okay.
But I remember Quincy and Dewey and of course James and of course Frankie. I just remember like these boyfriends were so into you. That's what I remember.
I think Dewey was my shortest one, maybe probably. Yeah, I think I found out quickly he was talking to somebody else too. So that didn't last very long at all. But yeah, the other ones were, pretty long relationships. I really wasn't into the microwave relationship. Like you just date for 1 week and that's it. So some lasted longer than they should have, but some didn't last long enough. But
right.
When I think of boyfriends and you, my first thought is even not a word. It's more like.
He's making that Home Alone face.
Oh my God. Yeah. So if I had to think of a word, it probably would be like, I felt like I was on a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Just up and down, up and down.
Yeah.
Interesting. I could think of interesting.
I'd fall in love and get my heart broken. And fall in love and get my heart broken. Is that a good summation?
Yeah. You love hard. And you are like all in when you're in the relationship. And that wasn't necessarily reciprocated. So
right.
And I think that, it's hard to watch someone you love be basically like not respected to the fullest. You know, that's what you deserve and didn't always get. And like me, though, you may have been there in their relationship, some relationships too longer than you should have. But, we learned from all of them and, grew from all of them. So, they help build certain characteristics that we have. So, I suppose it was all for a reason. Quite a journey.
Yes. And I found a journal, I don't know, 10 plus years ago from my teenage years. And when I saw what I was writing, I was like, man, I did not know what I was doing at all. I was just like, I thought I was grown. And it's not like when I say that I was fast or anything, quote unquote fast, but I totally didn't know what I was doing. I was just so young, trying to do adult things. So,
but that's the cycle of life, right? It's not like we were 14 with boyfriends. So,
yeah.
I didn't say any names for your boyfriends, but I'll just say some of them, I was glad that they were over when they were over. And I feel like now you know what you need and what to look for in a person and what you deserve and what to give at the same time. So,
absolutely. What comes to mind when you think about high school or early adulthood when we would go hang out at night?
I just think fun. I mean, we were good kids. I'd take me as a kid. So it's not like we were out like looking for trouble or getting into trouble.
No. But we had a good time. We went to the Vermilion Room, and there was someplace else I was trying to remember, or that I remembered as I'm drawing a blank on. But of course, the Vermilion Room was somewhere we went all the time.
Let's back it up to the 747.
That's what I couldn't remember. Yes. The 747.
Yes.
When we were teenagers, remember? 5 to 10 p.m.
That was a bunch of Black people in the suburbs.
Yes. Everybody would go. That was fun.
Yeah, that was fun. I mean, that's what I think of. I think that we just were, typical kids of that age and just, out to have fun. And I really liked about the 747, again, it's seeing other people that look like yourself and hearing music that we were drawn to. Although I think our music was pretty diverse, but I really liked it because you would have people at 747 who were from all over. They could be from the suburbs, they could be from the city.
Yeah.
So it was very diverse in that aspect.
It was. That was so much fun.
But, the thing about us going out is like, I always knew I had somebody that had my back. So that's all I did.
What do you remember about us being in New York?
It's funny. I remember a mix because I remember us working. I remember us hanging out. I remember us dating people, even though I had a boyfriend. But, we went through we're together today. We're not together tomorrow. Okay, let's get back together. I remember you having a car when you had your car there.
Yeah, it was broken into. My naive self, there was a chop shop on the street. My naive self thought they might look out for my car. Me not knowing they're a chop shop, not recognizing that.
Mm-hmm.
Of course they are. They're open at 2 and 3 in the morning when we would get home.
Mm-hmm.
And my car was broken into. I felt so violated.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Because it was still, a neighborhood, but it's still the city. I just remember, I guess transportation is big for me when I think of the city and the train and transferring and waiting on a train and the smell of the subway, and you're always looking out for the crazies. And one time I remember on a train where it's like packed like sardines, and this guy, like, he couldn't be any closer. He's up on me, and then he starts grinding on me. And I was just like, is he really grinding on me? And like, I remember calling Sam from my job, so upset, like just really upset. And I'm like, New York is a hot mess sometimes, So, I remember that. I remember, where we lived and the neighbor next door who was a witch.
Oh,
and
my God. Yes.
The other word, but she was a witch. I think she just didn't like Black people, but everything, she had a problem with everything that I did.
Yeah.
I remember having a party.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up when we had that party for my birthday. Mm-hmm. And she called the police, remember?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She was something.
She was something else. But I think overall, I'm glad that we did it. It was fun to be there. It's something I had always wanted to do, to live in New York City. And then just to have you there with me was, icing on the cake. So we both had the struggles together. I remember like most of my paycheck going to rent, and then I would just call home or my grandma to get like other monies for something I really wanted to buy.
Right.
So it was a good time, and I'm glad that we did it. We're familiar with the city, kind of know where to go, where not to go. We met some good people. What do you think of?
I think of that. Those were some good days, the early days. I had my dog at the time, Gigi, who I had since childhood, and Gigi died there while we were living there in Queens. And I remember I think it was 89 when she died, because I think it was the year that you're going to say this is so typical of me to remember something like this, but I think it was the year that they had the earthquake during the World Series in San Francisco. But anyway, that's beside the point. That I remember calling, you wouldn't think this would happen in New York, but I remember calling a vet or emergency hospital in the middle of the night because Gigi had passed, and they were just so nice, and the woman was so nice. And then they came the next morning, and they got Gigi's body, and then she ended up sending like a card, like a handwritten card. Never met the woman in person, but I remember that. I remember we lived near the mall. And you would get the part-time job during Christmas for extra money, and I just did not want to do that. And you were in such good shape at Christmas time, likewise, and I just did not want to get that extra job.
I just wanted the discount.
Oh, okay. But, Macy's was
on the street. Remember when they were filming Coming to America? And I had no clue that, because I remember it was Wendy's, and I remember they changed the sign to whatever it was, McDonald's, and I was like, McDonald's? What is
McDowell's? Did
that?
They call it in the movie? Did they call it McDowell's or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. And I was like, what happened to Wendy's? I had no clue they were filming anything over there. I mean, that was literally in walking distance from where we were.
Yeah. And I also had that experience of somebody grinding me on the subway. It's so wild. And you ended up leaving because you got married. And I ended up staying for several years. Well, I came back to Atlanta actually, and then went back for several years. But yeah, I remember.
Once I left, I knew I would never come back. I mean, unless I, hit the lottery, because I can't live the way I want to live. I want a penthouse in Central Park West with the view and everything. And you know what's funny? I always remember wanting at that time to live in Trump Tower.
Get out.
Yep, I remember wanting to live there. And today, heck to the nah.
Right. I mean, that's another story, but I do remember just him being, just a Looney Tune. I remember him and Ivana going through their divorce, and her making a comment to the news that he had a small penis. And it was a big deal. And he had a counter to it. He, came back and had to counter it. And I thought, why are you saying anything? Like, if it just goes away if you just don't say anything. But he, got very defensive and had to have a rebuttal after a certain number of days. Like, no, I'm not. That's not true. And try to jab her as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's what I bet he did. Yeah.
But I remember just you would meet people sometimes, and then there would be a party for us to go to. So we'd go to parties at the Seaport or, somewhere in Brooklyn, or we just go to parties all over the place. And we meet different people. And I just, it was a good time.
It was a good time. Yeah.
Were you engaged when you left, or did you just know you were going to get married?
Yeah, no, I definitely was not engaged when I left, but Sam was like, you need to move back and just trust me.
Sam, we should make clear, Sam is from Queens originally. But he was working at IBM in Rochester, or Xerox, excuse me, in Rochester, right?
Right. Which is an hour away from Buffalo, a little over an hour from Buffalo. So, it's like, okay, do I go back and trust this guy to do what I need him to do? Or like my mom, don't put all your eggs in one basket, So it's like, I'm just gonna, have to take a leap of faith here, and move back. I didn't move in together, but I did move back and would stay with him sometimes, and then home.
You moved to Buffalo. Was he in college at that point, or I just said he was at Xerox, but he was already at Xerox at that point?
Yeah, he was already working, and I was blessed enough to get a job with the same company that I was with in New York, back home in Buffalo, covering Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse. So,
which was Liz Claiborne. I think that left my memory that you worked with Liz Claiborne in Buffalo. Okay, so for a time you guys were in two different cities, but an hour away.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I would stay with him because if I had to do Syracuse, it's closer to get there from Rochester than Buffalo. So.
Right. I want to move into our parents. And I want to do that through your wedding, because one of the memories, your parents were second parents to me. And one of my memories is your wedding. I have a lot of memories that I want to mention, a few. I want to mention. But one of the memories of your wedding is just looking at your parents. I think they were separated when you got married.
They were still living together at that time. So,
okay,
yeah.
Well, maybe they
wasn't
just
good, but they were living together.
Right, okay, because I just remember them sitting together, and they just seemed so bonded in their love for you. Like I looking at them and looking, just seeing their love for you all over their face. It was bittersweet for them. To tell you the truth, like if they love you, you're getting married, they're happy for you, and then it's like their baby, you know? And so that's what I remember about your wedding. I remember everything from A to Z, but, the other thing that I love to mention is just, we were up all night. I think maybe we went to bed at maybe 4:35 and maybe got up at 6. I mean, that was that, little window of time. And just when you woke up, we slept in the same room, in the same bed. And when you woke up the next morning, you were like a kid on Christmas, you were just like, I can't remember exactly what you said, but it was, something akin to it's morning, and you were just a kid on Christmas. I'll just never forget it.
That's funny. I don't really remember saying that. But I mean, I could see why I would feel like that, because I did, like, I won't say hound him, but I was ready to just live together, and I didn't want to do it without a ring, and I just wanted to do it the right way. I didn't want to have, a kid before we got married. So, and, I was, totally in love.
Yeah.
Totally in love.
Yeah.
So, and it came at a time after I had been through, a loss. So
right.
When it happened, I think I was ready for him, and I was excited, I guess, for that day to just get it going.
And this, I know I've told you a number of times, but when I look back on your wedding, you have 3 daughters now who are young adults. Your youngest is a freshman in college, and then your middle daughter is 23. She's a graduate.
Yes.
She's 23, and then your oldest is 29, 28. 28. So Asia, your oldest, my goddaughter.
Well, they're all your goddaughters.
That's true. I have this sense, there's things that I know, I'll talk about in this podcast, or, just spiritually in general. There's things that I know, when it comes to God, that I know in my own spirit. And there's just something in me. You weren't pregnant or anything like that when you got married. And there's just something in me that knows that Asia existed. When I know if that's true for Asia, it's true for all of us. But there's just something that when I look back on your wedding day and I think about, this was before the girls were born and all of it came into the world and everything. I just have this strong knowing that Asia existed. I go back to, us dancing at the reception and, just all that. Oh, Asia existed at that time.
Well, first, I just want to step back a little bit and say, who remembers how one's parents looked at a wedding? But, you have just always been so observant of things, and you retain it. And, I think if I think about the weddings I've been to, I have no clue what their parents was looking like. But, that's so you. And as far as Asia, you've always said that, and I just rolled with it. Okay. And I believe it, though, because I feel like you have always said it, and you have that sense about you, and that, I don't know if it's a sixth sense, but it's, you're very in tune to your spiritual side. So.
Right. Yeah. And it's so funny. Speaking of boyfriends, did you forget I had a boyfriend at the wedding?
No, I did not.
Who showed his ass?
Well, I think you told me about him acting a fool, so I didn't really see it. Yeah. I don't remember seeing it. But if I had saw something, the one insisted on coming, so I don't know why he came up there to clown, but I knew no matter what, you were still going to be there for me. So
Right. And this is a good way to segment into your dad because we were going, it might have been we were going to the rehearsal or something. And there were like a couple of cars. And my boyfriend at the time he didn't go to the rehearsal. But I remember you saying, Adrianne, would you ride with my dad? We don't have enough room in the car. The car with the girls. Would you ride with my dad? We don't have enough room in the car for all the girls.
Oh my!
I was sad by this boyfriend being a jerk, and but it was all cool. I was always good with your father. We always really enjoyed each other's company, so it was all good. But
well, think about it. Who else could I put with my dad?
Right.
Yeah.
So you lost your dad and your grandmother. I want to focus on him, first, but you lost him about a year and a half ago, I would say. Where are you in the grieving process? And do you want to speak to your relationship with your dad a little bit?
Ooh. Adrianne trying to be like Oprah and get somebody to cry up in here. Well, obviously, like I've said, I love my father, and I think he loved me. He definitely, raised me, took care of me, provided as I grew up. However, he was a cheater. He was, I could say, even from young age, I remember him doing things inappropriate with women that he shouldn't have did. And I want to almost say a serial cheater, because I remember, like, even from my being like 6 and having an affair with, because we lived in a house where we were upstairs and other people lived downstairs, and there was a lady downstairs and he cheated with her. And so when I was older, he got involved with somebody, and, my mom would tell me about it. So I think I was living in New York at this time. And I would approach my dad. I would ask him about it, and he would deny it. He made it almost seem like my mother was crazy. Now, I knew she wasn't crazy.
Right.
And, it was just ugly. And I remember talking to my friend, and she would say how her dad cheated. But what stuck in my mind was that her dad cheated, but he always kept it away from the house. Where with my father's situation, the lady that I'm referring to now, when I was older, she would call the house, this is before cell phones. So multiple hangups on the phone, it really be stressing my mother out. One time she did say some really rude things I won't go into, but some really rude things to my mom on the phone. And that's when I thought of my friend, like, okay, if you're going to do it, keep it away from home, And so, it really upset me. Like, how can you do that to somebody and just leave? If that's the case, go. And one day, I think the girl called, and I was at my parents' house. We got into it, me and her, over the phone. And then, apparently my dad wasn't even home. Apparently she told my dad. Then my dad went off on me. And, I'm like, nobody. He's like, you can't tell me who called my house. And I'm like, nobody's going to be calling my mother, disrespecting her. And, I'm mad over that, because really, you coming at me for something you shouldn't be doing anyway. So, in those later years, kind of to make a long story short, we were estranged. So my parents got divorced. This person he ended up marrying, although he really never said those words to me. One day he said, what will you think of if I got married? And I said, it depends on who it is. And that was the last conversation we had. So one day I seen him with a ring on, and then one day I didn't see him with a ring on. So I knew he was married though. So, we were just estranged. I felt like very abandoned, like how do you abandon your family like that and just go off with somebody else? And it was really nasty, the divorce, and, him sneaking stuff out the house, my mom sneaking stuff out the house. And I just feel like as a mom, I could never put anybody before my kids. And that's what I felt like he did. I felt like he put somebody before me. I get it. You have a spouse, but that person or that situation should not come between our situation. And he was mad that I would not even acknowledge that person when I did call him. Because again, before cell phones, I'd call him I wouldn't say hi. She'd answer. I'd say, "Can I speak to Al?" And he didn't like that. And I'm like, "I'm sorry, I don't have nothing to say to that lady, and I will not be saying it, saying hi or anything else." And lady, I'm using loosely.
Yeah.
Anywho, so when he passed, I don't think we had spoken in quite a while. What do you think, Adrianne? I mean, it had been a minute that I talked to my father.
Yeah, it was years.
Was it years?
Since you had talked to him?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely years.
Maybe it was years. Yeah. So, and that's another thing that kind of upset me because he was very close to Asia. Well, I mean, super close to Asia. So my oldest, because he was around when she was born, and then Alexa somewhat, but then Aaliyah, my youngest, really didn't know him. So I felt like, again, him missing out on his grandchildren. Again, how could you do that? So he did make it to like Asia's graduation from college, did not make it to Alexis. So I think at that time he was like not in the best health though. So I remember Adrianne saying to me, "Oh, Tonya, you should call him. If something happened, you'll regret not talking to him." And I really felt like I wouldn't regret it because I had pretty much said everything that I had to say. And when he got sick and was in the hospital, it's tough seeing somebody you love, regardless of the status of your relationship. So it was hard seeing him like that. But then I had went out of town, I think that next week, and he passed. And his wife, who was the same woman I had mentioned earlier, called my daughter and told her. So there was a lot of conversation about, if we're going and
to the funeral.
To the funeral. And then my closest cousin, Clarence, he's the only child also. And there was some like talk with his mom about, I don't know. It was just a lot of foolishness that she was like, "I'm too old to be having this conversation," like with the wife at that time. And so we did end up going, my family and then my cousin and his wife, and we just all together. And then we decided not to go to the actual, part where they put you in the ground. So I was fine during the funeral. I think after everybody had left, it was just, my family and my cousin. And I did cry then, which kind of just came. I didn't even know where that came from. And then I don't regret, though, anything.
Well, you did go to the hospital. Well, you said that you went to the hospital just now. But you did get to... You talked to him. I mean, I know he couldn't, I don't think he was able to respond, but there were things that you were able to tell him that you loved him. And
he was saying some things that I couldn't make out what he was saying. But yeah, I did tell him, I loved him, and I tried to encourage him to fight. And, he went through some similar things that my mom went through, and
he had a stroke.
Yeah. So.
Do you feel like you're still grieving? You're still processing? What do you think? What do you think you're healing?
I think probably a combination of grieving and healing still. I mean, if he was here, I wouldn't be talking to him probably anyway. So I think that just sometimes it's hard to believe like that he's not here. Like, even if I wanted to call him, I can't, so that's just weird. It's just odd. It's just odd going to Buffalo and knowing that he's not in that house. Very odd. But, so yeah, I think I'm just trying to heal and,
Well, one, I want to say that, our fathers were similar, as you know. My father wasn't faithful, and for much of my life, he died when I was 21. He wasn't faithful, and but my parents stayed together. And there was something else I wanted to mention. Well, so I went to see your dad when I was in Rochester, when I came to see you, maybe about 5 years ago now, when I came to see you for Christmas, the week between Christmas and New Year's. It was just surreal sitting in the kitchen because he was in the house that, you all lived in. And she wasn't home, and he wasn't trying to hide that. I assumed she was his wife. I can't remember if he said it or not, but I think he made reference to her, and there was a picture up or something. But it was just surreal sitting in that kitchen where I had sat so many times. I just had so many memories of sitting there eating cereal, or something was cooking on the stove, or being on the phone that was on the wall. And, just sitting in there as a child or as a teenager. And then here I am sitting across from your dad, and we're just talking, and the circumstances were so different, but it was really, really good. It was a really, really good visit.
Yeah.
So
Only your best friend would do that. Go see your dad.
I wanted to see him. What do you mean? I wanted to see him.
But it's funny because like other people you visit, you make me go with you. But
right. I drag you. I drag you. I went by myself.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that was good. That was good. But he was older. I mean, that was, I think, a few years after he had a significant stroke. So, but we were good. We were even talking about my dad and stuff. So
it's so funny how they were so alike in so many ways. But I know my dad looked up to your dad. Your dad was kind of like a trailblazer for him.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because my dad went to what's that academy called? The
hostage, the
FBI Academy. Yeah,
for hostage. Because they were both hostage negotiators. Yeah. And it was so funny because he was like, "Yeah, John, he was kind of mean." Not to him, but in general, he was like, "Yeah, he was kind of mean." And so I was like.
They probably were like us in many ways, right? They probably felt connected being in a profession that was predominantly Caucasian,
right.
Not many of them, especially at that time.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that they were drawn together.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And so you lost your grandmother. Was it the next week, or I know their funerals were very close together. So
yeah, my grandmother passed the day of my dad's funeral.
Right.
And like they were trying to get me to come there. I'm like, I cannot come today. But so yeah. And I think with my grandmother, it's just, hoping that now that she's on the other side, that she knows how much I loved her. I felt like it was hard for her. I had to move her from Buffalo to Rochester, and it was super hard for her to be away from my mom and her church. Those are like the main things. And it's like, just trying to do the best for her, make sure she has a good situation. And there were many times she was pissed at me. I was pissed at her. There were, I think, pieces of dementia that trickled in that at the time I didn't realize were dementia. And I was just like, why is she being so cranky and mean, But I'm sure now that she's on the other side, she realized that I only had her best interest at heart. And,
Yeah. I think it's that's a passing that I think I've just been amazed at, how well you've handled that, because, she just, I have childhood memories of her. I have childhood memories of when she moved into her house and how we would have to go shopping for, paint. And we would go shopping for all these things you do when you're buying a house, and it was so boring, or just we were at her house when OJ broke the rushing record, watching on the little black and white TV set. Countless memories of her dog King. And now Ruby could be me. Talk about me. Talk about John. Ruby could be me.
Yes, good.
But
never to us.
No, she wasn't. She wasn't. She used to call me that girl, though. Did you call that girl back? Or I would call you on the phone over her house, and she would say to you, "It's that girl."
Well, don't take it personal, because she never got anybody's names right, including my kids. So,
well, no, I don't take it personally. I was around too long. But yeah, that's amazing. So you've definitely got people with you in spirit.
Yeah.
And so your mother is another amazing story for me. She had a stroke in 2008 is what I want to say.
I feel like your audience will be like, this is a sad story.
No, it's not. I just want them to know who they are. And there are people in my life too. And it's hard. I mean, my mother, even now, my mom passed in 2006. And even right now, I miss my mother so much. Right now, and in the last few weeks, I've just been like, God, I just wish I could call you. Or a couple weeks ago, I just started talking to her out loud in the kitchen. I was remembering how she used to dance because she had no rhythm, and I started like dancing like her a little bit. And so then I was like, if you had just put a little shimmy in your shoulders, then it would have been a little. I started saying that out loud. So I just wonder, how difficult it is for you with your mom right now.
Yeah. Well, it's super hard. I think, especially around holidays, and out of all the ones that we've mentioned, I was closest to my mom. And so, it's just really hard, especially when, she went in to have a stent put in, and she basically never went home from that. In
her brain, right?
And in her artery. Yeah. And so her carotid artery. We never expected it. I went to the hospital with her thinking, she was supposed to go home the next day. And then, whatever could have went wrong. And so she is on her left side, 100% dependent. So that means that, she can't walk. She's, has to be transported everywhere. And it's super difficult when it first happened. It was really hard to understand what she was saying because it affected her speech. She was tube fed for a long time, which was probably the biggest prayer I had, because if you could envision not being able to eat food, and not only being able to eat food, but seeing other people eat food while you can't eat food. So I'm just, thankful to God that she can now eat whatever she wants to eat. But, you really have to be an advocate for your loved one. And I would always press it. I swear she could eat, and I would give little things. And then how do you get to the point where you can eat if you don't exercise those muscles to eat? That's what I was trying to get an answer to that one. So, finally we got to the point where she can eat, but she's still in a place where it's hard for her to, it's not like I could just pick her up in my car and bring her home. That can't happen, so it's very expensive to bring her here. So I miss her, but I'm thankful that she can eat, and I'm thankful that she has her memory. She has always said, since as long as I can remember, before anything ever happened, just don't let me lose my memory.
Yeah.
So, I can talk to her on the phone. I almost have a second version mother. It's hard to explain, but she's not exactly the same. I would say she's probably about, I don't know, I'd give her 90% there. But there are some things that she says that are off. But for the most part, she remembers everything. You could talk to her one week, and the next week she'll remember what you talked about. So, and then she always asks me about people. I know Darlene called her the other day. Talia passed this week. So, not this week, this year. So she, had a lot of questions about that. And it's super hard. I think for anybody whose mom is compromised or not with them,
especially now during the pandemic. Yeah. I haven't even thought about how you can't go see her if you wanted to, could you?
It seems like every time the facility gets to a place where you can visit, the next thing you're getting texts we have 5 cases of COVID. So you can't visit now, but I feel like they need a good stretch before I feel comfortable going to visit, but I can FaceTime her. So that's good.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So I have these questions I like to ask everyone on this podcast. I call them 4 healing questions for my healers. Okay. And you have this way, I don't know how to describe you when it comes to spirituality. You have this way with words. If I said, Tonya, would you say a prayer for me? Can we say a prayer together on the phone right now? I really need something to go right, and then all of a sudden you just come out with something that's like somebody on Sunday morning would say in the pulpit.
You're so funny.
Where does that come from? Where does that come from?
I think it's just, attending service. And, I think I've heard reference to, attending church, and it's like deposits, into your spirituality. And I've heard reference like analogies where they compare it to a gas tank, where if you, don't go, your tank is on empty. So I just think it's hearing, and some things stick, some things don't, some things resonate, some things don't. And yeah, I think that's it.
All right. How would you describe your knowing of God?
My knowing of God. I think it starts from little. So I think we both grew up Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, I remember my mother making reference to God and going to church. But when she was young, she was forced to go to church all the time. And so she said she would never do that when she had kids. So I really only attended church occasionally with my grandmother, which was a very different experience because it was a Baptist church. Mm-hmm. Than when I would go on holidays with, my parents to a Catholic church. So I did have exposure growing up. And then I don't think I ever went to church when I was in New York City. But when I moved back to Rochester, I felt a yearning to, you feel it inside, a yearning to hear the word and to grow in your spirituality. So I would say that it just started when I was mm-hmm. young. The seed was planted. Mm-hmm. And, there were periods in my life where I didn't water that seed. And then I just felt a need to have a more meaningful relationship with God. But even when I wasn't going to church and younger, I've always prayed. Ever since I can remember being young, I remember praying. Typically, I was asking for something, but
what do you know about God with everything that you just said? Like, what is it that you know?
I know that God has me no matter what. I know that I may not understand everything, but that he understands, and I have to rely on that. And I feel like I know that he's always with me, and he is faithful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when do you most feel the presence of the Spirit of God?
When do I most feel the presence? I would say when I'm in prayer, maybe. Definitely when I'm in church, I feel the Holy Spirit. I feel the presence of God. I feel the Trinity. I feel everything. Even online, sometimes, I find it more challenging online attending service, but there are times I can still feel the Spirit. But I think when I'm quiet in a quiet place and thinking about something without distractions, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What type of church do you go to online or in person, if you could? Like, is it any particular denomination? Or
yeah, it's non-denominational.
What do you think God calls you to do for yourself and others through your work?
I think that, I work at a college helping college students. So I think that he calls me to help them holistically and put them in a better position when they leave than when they came. Yeah, I feel that I also feel God when there are times, and I don't do it all the time. I just kind of do it when I feel something tells me to do it. So you know how you might see people on the corner asking for money. Mm-hmm. Well, I only do this in the daytime. Let me preface it with that. But I feel something inside that tells me to give to them. Mm-hmm. And so I'll just go on my wallet, and it'll depend, on what I have in there to give them. So I feel like he's also calling me to do that for whatever mm-hmm. reason and however I can. I like have taken my family to like centers where we've given out food on Thanksgiving. So I feel a calling for that. I just don't feel like I've done it as much as I could do it.
Yeah. Tell me about a time when you had a miracle or a blessing and you said, God totally did that. I had nothing to do with it.
Girl, when I wake up every day, I say, this is a blessing. Yep, I am. Like, that's real talk, though. I mean, I had the virus. I think I'm thankful that, I didn't have to go to the hospital. I didn't have breathing problems. So one could call that a miracle. I don't know if it was a miracle, but it definitely, was God taking care of me.
Were you worried?
Initially, I can't say I really was worried. I'm sure I thought about it a little bit, but during that time, I was just honestly sleeping so much. I didn't have time to think about a whole lot, but I felt like as long as I was could breathe okay, I was in a good space. So, I don't know. As far as miracles, I mean, I'm blessed to have my children. You think about childbirth, there's a whole lot to being involved with being pregnant and having birth and giving birth to kids. So, I'm blessed in that area. They're all healthy. So that's a blessing. I'm blessed to have my mom in spite of her situation. I'm blessed to have a best friend and a sister. Not everybody has it. Some people have sisters and don't get along with their sisters. So I'm blessed for that. I'm blessed to have a husband who's very patient because I know I can be a lot. Tells me all the time, ooh, there's a special place in heaven for me.
Even so, he's a lucky man.
He is.
He's a damn lucky man.
Yep. So I think relationship has its up and downs, but I can honestly say pretty much everything that I've needed or wanted, or he's found a way to make it happen.
Right.
And he's always worked hard, always taking care of us. So I'm definitely blessed to have that and that longevity and
of your marriage.
Yeah.
Because you've been married how many years?
In April, it'll be 30.
Good God.
Yeah.
Wow. 30 years. 30 years.
Yeah. I remember having this conversation with my girlfriend, Lori, and we were talking about dads. And she was talking about her dad and, she had similar issues like with her dad and being remarried. And she was like, well, Tonya, when you have like little things that happen to you, special things, think of it as gifts from your loved ones on the other side. And so I'm like, yeah, I'll think of that. And recently that a friend of mine had wrote me a check for some money. And I felt like that's immediately what I thought of. Like, I'm sure that was my loved ones just sending me a gift.
I do have one more question, but I just remembered something. And I actually started to bring this up earlier. I had, before the podcast on the phone.
No.
So I had mentioned that to the listeners, that my dad wasn't faithful. And my parents actually got to a point where they split up. And then shortly before he died, they split up and then they got back together and they were in a good place for about 4 months. And then he died. But I remember when I was in high school, somebody called, he wasn't home, and somebody called and they said it was a hotel confirming a reservation. And my mom at the time was living in Canada. Like they weren't separated. She just worked in Canada and, lived in Canada because that's where her job was. And so Jeff, my older brother, I think he was home from like the military or something like that. And so they said they were calling to confirm this reservation. Anyway, I was like, oh no, Dad's going to this hotel with this other person. I just got this call. And the next day, I just wanted to go to school. I knew he was going to be asleep when I went to school the next morning, my father. So I just wanted to go to school and, I wouldn't have to see him, wouldn't have to bring it up, nothing. Right. Well, I overslept the next day. Okay. And so Jeff had told him about it when he got home. So because I overslept, my dad had to take me to school. Okay. I was like, oh no, all I want to do is not have to discuss this. Okay. Where you, on the other hand, are like, what the hell is going on if something like this comes up, right?
But I was older.
Right. Anyway, he brought it up in the car and he was like, I don't know what that was about, but I'm going to give them a call and I'm going to ask them, like this hotel, like, what the hell are they doing? Or, something like that. And I was like, yeah, okay, fine. So, but I was thinking yesterday about how I had gone to see this intuitive a couple years ago. And I wanted to connect with my dad because I usually always want to connect with my mother. And he was saying how he was, through her, that he was, I guess he regretted examples that he gave me of relationships. I can't remember the way she phrased it, but he had regrets because he could see what I was experiencing as an adult in my relationships. And so he was really sorry about that. And I was thinking about that earlier because I remember my mom used to sometimes, I would be really little. I might have been like 10, 11, 12 years old. And she'd just be sitting on the couch and she'd be crying. And I would say, why are you crying? And she would never tell me why she was crying. And so sometimes she did experience depression sometimes, but I really feel like it would be related to my dad. I feel like it was related to him and maybe something he had said or whatever situation was going on with them at the time. And she would never tell me. So I give her kudos for never telling me because their relationship never came between how I felt about him or it never interfered with my relationship with him, even though it bothered me a hell of a lot. And then I bring up her just crying because as a young adult, and even maybe a little older adult, there's been so many times where I would be in a relationship and I'd just be crying. I'd just be crying over the guy because I was just so hurt, And so it's like, I feel like I just, my mom, the stuff she experienced in her, I definitely have her heart. I just felt like that just dropped into me. So those are just some of my musings about this whole thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I give your mom credit because my mom told me everything. And I'm talking about everything. And actually, my dad would say to me, your mom shouldn't be telling you all that. So, I have mixed emotions on it. I mean, even if she didn't tell me everything, I certainly wasn't clueless.
Right.
I still had, my opinions on things. And he, irregardless, wasn't treating her the way she should deserve to be treated. And he didn't handle the situation. So, I have mixed emotion. And it wasn't like I was, 15 or 12. So.
Yeah. I mean, eventually it was no secret. And she probably told me herself about him being unfaithful. But I'm just saying that she never gave me any details. But I picked him up anyway along the way, one way or another.
For the intuitive to mention that he had regrets on, situations that he modeled for you is pretty on point, I think. I can see why he would feel like that. And I could see how those types of relationships and characteristics in men came into your life.
Big time. Big time.
Yeah.
Big time. I mean, for years, I thought that men just cheat, period. Accept it. Men cheat.
Except Obama.
What'd you say?
Except Obama.
Well, he came along when I knew better, but yeah, I just thought that was just something to accept. And one of my boyfriends throughout all of my 20s, that's how I handled it. Men cheat. So he would be unfaithful and I wouldn't go anywhere because that's what I thought. Well, he'll come back and he would come back. And I mean, to this day, I love him. I mean, there'll always be, I think, a certain amount of love between us. But, that's not the kind of relationship that, I or a woman wants.
You know what? That's kind of funny because I swear, even though I went through all that with my dad, I never thought that. I thought, nope, they're gonna be faithful. And I swear, I never thought about a guy cheating on me. But it was like, if you're cheating, then it's on, because I'm cheating too.
Well, I also had other examples. You know, I didn't see for a long time. I did not see any married man that was faithful. So that's what I was looking at. Mm-hmm. So I just got to another point through therapy and through God, you know, just my spirituality and working this stuff out through God. I just got to a different point in myself. Yeah. But yeah. All right. So my last question. So I see people as healers.
Are they dead? You see dead people? Okay.
Well, no, you don't, because you're like, don't be coming to me.
Well, I have seen them, but I was like, oh no. You need to come during the daytime, bro.
I know you saw something, but I thought that was a dream.
No, I definitely saw my dad.
Okay.
At nighttime on the left side of my bed. Wow. And I flew up out that bed.
Did you?
Mm-hmm, yeah, I'm sure I told you this. I know
you did, but I don't know. Maybe it was two separate things. I thought I remembered what I remembered was a dream. Or was there a mirror involved? Was he like by a mirror or something like that?
No, but I think I told you at the foot of my bed, I have a mirror. So I didn't see him in the mirror. I actually saw him on the left side of my bed. And,
wow.
You know, it was a little scary. I mean, I flew out my bed like, what? No, bro, come back during the day. Yeah. So.
Well, I will say that when my dad died, I had a vision of him. I lived in this studio apartment, and so I slept on, the couch that pulled out into a bed, and there was a doorway to the kitchen, and I had a vision. This is before I knew he had died, of him like walking past the doorway of the kitchen, and he had on this like brown sort of velvety type shirt that he had, and so come to find out later that that's what he died in.
The velvety shirt?
Yeah. He died in the shirt that I had this vision of him in. And I felt like really like I had a lot of anxiety inside. Like I was mad at him because we were in an ice storm. I was living here and I had talked to them earlier in the night and my parents, and I had ordered like a cheesesteak sandwich or something, and my father was like, you don't have any food in the refrigerator. That's just crazy. You're in a snowstorm, yada, 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 yada. So when we hung up, I was just, oh man, I was like, well, I got something to eat. I don't know what he's talking about, And so, I just went to bed just kind of like grumpy. And I just felt all this anxiety and just held that. And then I saw this vision of him. And then later I found out that's what he passed in.
Yeah, it's funny that you so when I think of your dad, I think of, he could be very hardcore sometimes, very but passionate. It's like, it reminds me of me a little bit because, like the girls will say to me, well, why are you yelling? I'm like, I'm not yelling. I'm just talking loud, but some things like you would tell me that your dad would say, I was like, he's hardcore, man.
He was
a softie. He kind of, he really was, unless you used his hairbrush. Other than that, he was really calm to talk to.
You talking about my dad?
I'm talking about my dad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But
I don't remember your dad being mean. And one thing I want to reference is how we would be in high school and I would go over your house to be able to stay out later. Like your dad knew that my dad was not going to let me stay out as late as you could. So maybe we might have to be home by like 12:30 or something at your house. And your father would be like, I won't tell John.
Yep, John didn't play.
Oh my God. No, he didn't. He thought that your parents held up that same rule.
Oh my God, too funny.
So anyway, I think of people as healers or seekers. Like I'm or they could be both. Like I'm always trying to like know God more. I'm trying to soak up, and know more and know more. And some people are natural healers. Literally, they might do like energy healing, or they might be like an intuitive, like we've been talking about. So do you see yourself, or even if you don't, now that I've put it to you, would you say that you are both a seeker and a healer, or are you a healer or a seeker?
I don't think I'm clear on the difference between the two.
So one is a person who is seeking to know God more in depth and just trying to absorb a lot, maybe through discussion groups. Like, I'm in different discussion groups around spirituality, or through this podcast. The podcast is a tool for me in many ways to engage in conversations, around God. That's food for me. That's food for my soul. And then some people are healers. They already have a deep knowing, and they use that knowing in a variety of different ways. Some people are like Reiki healers, where they can put their hands on you and they can heal you that way. Some people can heal you through conversation and their wisdom. They could be a therapist and be a healer, or they could be a counselor, a college counselor, and be a healer, or, they could be an intuitive, like we said. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I think so. Then if that's the case, I'm definitely not a healer. I would definitely be in the seeker category. And I think that, attending service, that probably would be my deepest way of seeking to get to know God more, or being more familiar with the word. I always have an objective and a goal to go into the Bible and actually, spend more time. And I can't honestly say that I've been doing that, but it is something that I want to do. So I would definitely be a seeker.
Well, cool. Well, thank you, Tonya. What I just thought of that we didn't even talk about was when we would go swimming, and your mom would have to do my hair. And your hair, you have better hair. You had the good hair. I mean, your mom would just come right out and say, your hair nappy, Adrianne.
Oh my God. And I only reason I remember that is because you repeat it so much throughout the years. I mean, I really don't even. I vaguely remember her. I mean, I do remember her doing your hair. And I remember, I thought you were just, tender-headed. But, we all have good hair.
Yes.
Yeah. So
that's the politically correct thing to say.
I mean, when you've known somebody as long as we've known each other, I mean, like, heck, we could talk about everything we could talk about Michael Jackson. We could talk about we can talk about the Silvers. We can talk about lots of things.
I don't know if we have a part 2.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. Remember, you can listen to all of our podcasts on traditional podcast platforms. And let me know what you think about some of the things we talked about, especially fathers and daughters. Until next time, let's start healing.